The locker room at Anfield was finally quiet, the air thick with the scent of deep heat rub and the distant rhythmic thud of a cleaning crew in the stands. Mohamed Salah sat on a wooden bench, his eyes fixed on a discarded piece of red athletic tape. For nearly a decade, this room had been his sanctuary and his pressure cooker. Now, it was just a room. At 34, Salah wasn't just leaving a club. He was outrunning a ghost that eventually catches every elite athlete. The red shirt was folded. The kingdom was gone. But a king without a throne is still a king. The question is, what does he do with the silence that follows? To understand the weight of that silence, you have to look at the noise that preceded it. Long before the bright lights of the Premier League, there was the hum of a public bus engine. Every morning in the village of Nagri, a young boy would start a journey that redefined the meaning of persistence. It wasn't one bus, it was five. 5 different transfers, 4 hours each way, nearly every single day. This wasn't just a commute, it was a grueling apprenticeship in isolation. While his peers were studying or sleeping, Salah was staring out of windows at the dusty roads of the Garbia Governorate. He carried his boots like a holy relic. His father, a government employee, didn't just pay for those bus fares. He invested in a dream that had no statistical right to succeed. In those hours of transit, Salah learned the most valuable lesson of his career. Talent is a gift, but endurance is a choice. He arrived at Arab contractors not as a polished prodigy, but as a survivor. By 17, he made the first team. He didn't play like a teenager. He played like a man who knew exactly how many miles he had traveled to get there. There was a desperation in his stride, a sense that every minute on the pitch had to justify the 8 hours spent on the bus. This internal engine is what eventually caught the eye of Basel in Switzerland. It was a massive leap, not just in geography, but in culture. Switzerland was cold, the language was a barrier, and the expectations were clinical. But Salah found a universal language in the way he moved. He didn't just run, he glided, slicing through defenses with a left foot that seemed to operate on a different frequency than the rest of the league. His performances against Chelsea in European competition were so disruptive they forced José Mourinho to act. Buying Salah wasn't just a tactical move for Chelsea, it was a defensive one. They wanted to stop him from hurting them. However, London proved to be a different kind of desert. At Stamford Bridge, the momentum he had built through years of sacrifice hit a wall of institutional indifference. In the Premier League's most ruthless environment, Salah became a ghost. 13 appearances, limited minutes, a bench that felt like a prison. It wasn't that he lacked the quality, it was that the system lacked the patience. When a young player is viewed as a luxury rather than a necessity, his confidence can erode faster than his physical gifts. Salah could have stayed. He could have collected the paycheck and faded into the background of football history. Instead, he chose the uncertainty of Italy. Fiorentina and Roma weren't just stepping stones. They were the workshops where the modern Mohamed Salah was forged. In Serie A, speed isn't enough. You have to understand the geometry of the pitch. You have to know when to wait. Under the watchful eyes of Italian tacticians, Salah transformed from a raw sprinter into a surgical forward. He learned how to protect the ball, how to manipulate a defender's balance, and how to finish with a clinical coldness that would define his later years. By the time Liverpool called in 2017, they weren't signing the kid who struggled at Chelsea. They were signing a finished product, a player who had already conquered his own doubts and was ready to conquer a league. His first season at Liverpool was an assault on the history books. 44 goals, 32 in the Premier League. It wasn't just about the numbers, it was about the inevitability of it. Together with Roberto Firmino and Sadio Mane, Salah formed a triumvirate that fundamentally changed how the world viewed attacking football. They didn't just score, they suffocated. Jurgen Klopp's heavy metal football found its lead guitarist in Salah. But with that success came a subtle, creeping danger. When you perform at a world-class level every single week, excellence becomes the baseline. You are no longer judged against other players, you are judged against your own peak. Every game without a goal became a crisis. Every misplaced pass was a sign of decline. Salah had built a statistical cage for himself, one where the bars were made of golden boots and Player of the Season trophies. The peak was breathtaking. The 2019 Champions League triumph in Madrid was the redemption for the tears of Kiev a year prior. The 2020 Premier League title ended a 30-year drought and cemented his status as a deity in the city. But the architecture of a dynasty is fragile. As the years passed, the core of that great team began to splinter. Mane left. Firmino left. Klopp announced his departure. Suddenly, the man who had been the focal point of a revolution was the last one left in the room. By the 2024-25 season, the numbers were still there. 29 goals and 18 assists, but the atmosphere had shifted. The arrival of Arne Slot brought a new philosophy, one that prioritized control and system-wide rotation over the individual brilliance that Salah had provided for nearly a decade. The friction was quiet at first, then loud. For the first time in his Liverpool career, Salah found himself starting matches from the bench. To the world, it was squad management. To a king, it was an insult. The cameras would zoom in on his face as he sat among the substitutes, a mask of controlled fury. This was a man who had spent his life overcoming the odds, now being told he was a tactical liability. It culminated in the public under-the-bus comment, a rare crack in the professional facade. It wasn't just about playing time, it was about respect. It was about the realization that the institution he had helped rebuild was already preparing for a future that didn't include him. On March 24, 2026, the inevitable became official. Liverpool confirmed his departure. The news didn't come as a shock, but it carried a specific sadness. It marked the end of the most prolific era in the club's modern history. But football has a cruel way of testing resolve. Just weeks after the announcement, during a match against Crystal Palace, Salah's body finally signaled its limits. A sudden pull in the hamstring, a collapse to the turf. The silence that fell over Anfield was haunting. It wasn't just an injury, it was a threat to the two things he had left: his farewell and his final World Cup. The medical reports were a tug-of-war between hope and reality. Egypt needed him. Liverpool wanted to honor him. With 51 days until the World Cup, Salah entered a different kind of transit. Instead of the 5 buses of his youth, he was navigating a schedule of physical therapy, ice baths, and grueling rehabilitation sessions. Every day was a race against a clock that doesn't care about legacies. He worked in the shadows, fueled by the same discipline that had carried him through the Garbia governorate decades earlier. He wasn't just fighting to play, he was fighting to finish his story on his own terms. He made it. On May 24, 2026, he stepped onto the Anfield turf one last time. It wasn't his most dominant performance, but it was perhaps his most human. When he assisted Curtis Jones for his 93rd Premier League assist, it felt like a final gift to the city. When the final whistle blew, the statistics stood still. 257 goals, 440 appearances, a mountain of trophies. But the real weight of the moment was visible when his family joined him on the pitch. Magi, his wife, who had seen the struggles in Basel and London, his daughters, Maka and Kayan, who had grown up in the shadow of the Kop. For them, Liverpool wasn't a club, it was home. The sight of Salah applauding the fans with his children beside him was a reminder that behind every global icon is a man trying to provide a stable life for those he loves. This wasn't a series of isolated mistakes. It was exactly how the system was designed to work. The system rewards youth and discards the veteran once the cost-to-performance ratio tilts. But Mohamed Salah refused to be discarded. The transition to the 2026 World Cup was immediate. The red of Liverpool was gone, replaced by the weight of a nation's expectations. At 34, Salah was no longer the explosive winger who could beat 3 men in a telephone booth. He had to evolve. Under Hussam Hassan, he moved into a more central, cerebral role. He became the conductor rather than the soloist. In the match against New Zealand, he showed the world what an aging king looks like. He didn't chase every ball. He waited. He watched. He moved into the box with a timing that can only be earned through 1,000 matches. A left-footed finish. A perfectly weighted corner. A 3-1 victory that gave Egypt its first ever World Cup win. It was a masterclass in adaptation. He proved that while the body might slow, the mind only sharpens. He was no longer playing for a contract or a higher salary. He was playing for the sheer, stubborn love of the game and the pride of the flag on his chest. He showed that greatness isn't a destination you reach and then leave. It's a state of being that you carry with you, regardless of the shirt you wear or the stadium you call home. The Egyptian king wasn't just a catchy chant. It was a title earned through a lifetime of bus rides, benchings, injuries, and the relentless pursuit of more. As he stood in the tunnel before the final group match against Iran, the lights of the stadium reflected in his eyes. He wasn't looking at the past. He wasn't thinking about the goals he had scored at Anfield or the trophies he had lifted in Europe. He was focused on the next 90 minutes. He knew that his time at the very top was limited, but he also knew that he had navigated the transition better than almost anyone before him. He hadn't faded away. He hadn't become a parody of his former self. He had simply become a different, more refined version of the boy who once spent 8 hours a day on a bus just for the chance to kick a ball. The story of Mohamed Salah at 34 isn't a tragedy about the end of a career. It is a testament to the power of the human will. It is a story about a man who realized that his kingdom wasn't a patch of grass in Liverpool or a stadium in Cairo, but the respect he had earned through years of unwavering discipline. He showed us that you don't have to be the fastest player on the pitch to be the most important one. You just have to be the one who refuses to stop moving forward, even when the world tells you it's time to sit down. The sun was setting over the stadium in North America, casting long, dramatic shadows across the pitch. Salah adjusted his captain's armband, a small piece of fabric that carried the hopes of millions. He looked toward the stands, seeing the faces of fans who had traveled from every corner of the globe to see him one more time. He didn't need the roar of Anfield to feel powerful. He didn't need the validation of a manager to know his worth. He was Mohamed Salah, a man who had turned a dusty road in Nagri into a highway to the stars. The match was about to begin. The noise from the crowd reached a fever pitch, a wall of sound that would have broken a lesser man. But Salah simply breathed in the humid air, felt the familiar tension in his muscles, and waited for the whistle. He knew that whatever happened in the next 2 hours, his legacy was secure. He had survived the system, he had survived the doubt, and he had survived the inevitable march of time. He was still here. He was still decisive. He was still the king, even if the map of his kingdom had changed. As the referee blew the whistle, Salah took his first step toward the ball. It wasn't the sprint of a 20-year-old, but the deliberate, calculated movement of a master. He looked up, scanned the field, and saw the space that no one else had noticed yet. He moved into it, a shadow in the sunlight, ready to change the game one more time. The red shirt was gone, but the fire remained. And in that moment, as the world watched to see if he would finally falter, Mohamed Salah did what he had always done. He kept going. He found the path through the noise. He lived for the quiet question. The desert wind carries no echoes.